Hello everybody and welcome to the extended free preview of this month's episode of What a Cartoon Movie, all about Project A-ko. I'm one of your hosts for this one, the maker of disgusting bento boxes, Bob Mackey, and who is here with me today as always?
Lost Space Princess Henry Gilbert.
And yes, we are taking another trip to Anime Town this month. It's been almost an entire year. I think the last thing that we did, was it Tokyo Godfathers?
Yeah.
So
Which is very different.
Back in December of 2022, now we're in October, and we're covering a movie that is less about class and more about, something that rhymes with that. But it's a fun cheesecakey sci-fi adventure, and it's one of the classics of anime that maybe an older boy told you about, but we're the older boys today that are going to cover it.
It really pioneered, it was a huge event in otakudom in the 80s in Japan, and then pretty much was one of the major U.S. releases of Japanese animation in America in the early 90s that helped popularize anime with so many American nerds. Guys like me became big fans of it too. So we explore the whole history of how it came to be and the history of its release in the US, including the amazing story of how the lost master was found. There's amazing history in Project A-ko.
Yeah, you're going to hear a bit of the history in this free podcast, but if you want to hear the rest of the history and hear our play-by-play of the entire movie, head on over to patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons and sign up for that $10 level. You'll get to hear the rest of this podcast and also the entire backlog of What a Cartoon Movie, nearly 5 complete years of, 3 to 6 hour long movie podcasts covering anything you can think of. We've done other anime like, Kiki's Delivery Service, Whisper of the Heart, Castle of Cagliostro. We've done lots of Disney Renaissance things like Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin and The Lion King and Hunchback of Notre Dame. We've covered every Toy Story movie to date. I can't possibly go over all of them because there's almost 60 at this point, but if there's a movie you like, we probably covered it, and if not, we'll cover it soon. And that's happening at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons. And if you're not a patron at the $5 level even, if you sign up for the $10 level, you get the $5 stuff too. And what does that include, Henry?
What Bob is talking about is the tons of exclusives we have, like Talking Futurama and Talk King of the Hill, where we cover those animated sitcoms just as in-depth as we do Project A-ko, and we have do a new episode of those each month, and you get the huge back catalog of us covering every episode of The Critic, every episode of Mission Hill, and many of our favorite episodes of Batman the Animated Series, which also has a lot of anime talk like we discuss in Project A-ko 2. There is over 150 exclusive $5 podcasts you get in addition to all the $10 stuff you get when you sign up at that level for the What a Cartoon Movie podcast. There's just so much you want to see at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons.
And if you've never signed up for Patreon before, it is so easy to do. And once you sign up, you can use a code you get from Patreon to listen to this podcast and all the bonus podcasts alongside your free podcast as part of your podcasting lifestyle in any app or device you might have. And there is also a Patreon app for any smart device you might have. You can listen to our bonus podcast that way as well. But no matter which way you do it, it's so easy to access all the podcasts waiting for you at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons.
So now let's don our battle bikinis and get ready to listen to this big chunk of the history of Project A-ko.
There's a vision in your heart, only you can achieve. You can climb the highest mountain.
Well, actually, I was thinking just a year ago, we were talking about another 1986 anime film that I also loved as a kid, Transformers the movie, and this has a lot in common with Transformers the movie, with a rockin' 80s soundtrack, awesome action, and a sense of humor to it as well, though this I'd say is a way better movie than Transformers.
Actually, I was looking at some old files and I saw we did Transformers the movie last October, and I thought, oh, I'm glad that's over with. Although it was a very fun podcast, but that's an excruciating film.
But yeah, when I first rented this one, I remember, the cover, it was such a colorful, beautiful looking thing, and you just have this striking thing of like a girl in a schoolgirl outfit with bright red hair running away from giant explosions and robots and everything. And I think too that it had a problem with its popularity in the US was that they popularized all, like you said, Bob, the conception of, well, all anime is like looking at the breasts of a high school girl while she like hits a robot.
Yeah, and I think when this was being marketed and sold, I think all of the stereotypical Japanese things were in it, like giant robots and schoolgirls and ninjas. Like, it was all of the things that I felt like, oh, really? Is this all there is? But I can accept those things now. But, I mean, with marketing, they were really focused on the most superficial elements of anime and Japanese culture.
Well, in American marketing, they had to push it hard in one direction for one type of man. They the demographic was a very thin margin, and so they're like, okay, find the 10 seconds of Eiko in her underwear spinning around from one of these to sell it on. Not even from this movie, but from another one. But yeah, no, I remember renting this from Blockbuster. It had the "definitely not for kids" sticker on it that I love to see. It was in the Japanimation
Actually,
section.
I had seen a number of things that were like this from the early anime days because I was an anime reviewer in the early aughts, and I've seen things like Plastic Little and I think like Demon Hunter Yoko, things that are just like cheesecakey, high budget anime. Of course, I believe those were OVAs and not movies, but they were of a similar ilk.
What they needed to have, like Project Eiko and the first volume of Devil Hunter Yoko as well, they had great J-pop like theme songs. Like I needed that, but that was because by heart of hearts, one of my all-time favorite anime series is Urusei Yatsura. I love it so much, and that pioneered the cute high school girl hijinks, high-level satire, goofy anime, and a lot of people who worked on UI worked on Project Eiko. So Eiko's just a natural extension of what was being done on the anime adaptation of Urusei Yatsura. But yeah, I rented this, watched it with my friends. My friend, after I rented it, he dubbed it. Like his dad had a setup for copying tapes. So we watched it all the times. I also remember feeling the diminishing returns of the sequels. And then because it never really had, unlike other series that got big in America that then got to have sequels made based on American demand, Eiko didn't have that. There never was more Eiko, though there were some spiritual successors I'll talk about. And so then Eiko, thanks as well to some other stuff I'll mention in the history, it fell out of prominence. Like you couldn't buy it for a certain amount of time. It wasn't streaming. And then also if it was streaming, it looked like shit. It looked and sounded like shit. And now that's all changed. But yeah, now when I watch it, especially in the brand new Discotek Blu-ray of it, I really appreciate its historical significance. And now that it looks so good, the high level, like there is some fantastic animation in this movie, like that really is worth celebrating. It is bubble economy Japan animation, which I love very, very much.
Yes, go play Yakuza 0. It is a documentary.
Yep, yeah. After the guys finished their nights of animating Eiko, they walked outside and were punching dudes till money just flew out of them everywhere. That's, God, I love that.
Watch out for the big guy who will steal all of your money, though.
Those guys are jerks, man.
Is it Mr. Shakedown?
Yeah,
Mr.
Mr.
Is that what the guy's name
Shakedown.
is?
Yeah. At least the Tokyo guy. I forget the Osaka guy, but yeah, the Project Eiko, I think now, at least for American fans, I think there's a better understanding of its place in history thanks to Discotek. But in case you don't know, and why are we talking about Project Eiko, why it matters, why don't I go into the history? And big thank you to the Discotek extras on this. They have so many. They have 2 commentary tracks. They have multiple documentaries, including a couple brand new ones they did. Tons of archival footage, an entire liner notes list of trivia, which I'll get more into when we do the movie. There's just so much cool stuff in there. And also, listener and pal of the show, Kaiser Beams, did a very good retrospective on their Kyoto video channel. So please check that out as well. But, okay, as for my history, though, I begin where it really matters. Porno!
Yeah, who put this porn in my podcast feed?
Yes. Now, that's funny you say, Bob, that it was perceived as lesbians fighting, because it's both not true and is true. Like, nobody has lesbian sex. Nobody is literally a lesbian in this, but that is about sapphic romance, and it does play a bit like a porno where you cut out the porno scenes in a way.
I mean, it's funny. The marketing was like that because I think we've moved on from this understanding now that we understand like queer identities and there's more discussion about that. But in the late 90s, early aughts, the idea was these lesbians are going to make out just for you.
Yeah, it's we talked about this a lot with the
A
Harley
straight man. Yeah,
with,
sorry,
with
go
the
ahead.
Harley Quinn Poison Ivy thing. That that's in this case too. Though there were some women who worked on this, but mainly it was men in all the key positions, and they were guys who liked drawing cute girls and would want to see those cute girls kiss.
And hey, I will admit, it's nice. It's always nice to see two attractive women together. There's nothing wrong with that. I can understand why they went with that angle for a lot of media properties.
But the interesting thing that's happened in time is that this thing's made with the intention of just making straight guys excited, instead does have a wider appeal to queer people, LGBTQ people who came to love it, or even like, I've heard from many girls who were my age, or now women, but who when they saw things like Project A-ko, or we talked about it in Rama 1/2 as well, like it was awakening for them. They're like, oh, I can play like this. I don't see in American cartoons, and now everything's fucking gay, so you don't have to settle for the breadcrumbs of like Biko touching herself thinking about Seiko. You actually can watch gay cartoons now. Porno, though, that's what I was talking about. So as always in technology, porno is some of the first stuff to take advantage of it. In Japan, I mainly refer to them as OVAs. They were originally called OAVs, original animation video, but AV specifically in Japan means porn, adult video. So they stopped calling things OAVs. OVA is the more accepted term in Japan.
Oh, that's the reason. Okay.
Yeah, it's when you call it an OAV, people just think, oh, you mean adult video, but in the early 80s, we've got the expansion of home computers. Many more people own television sets and their own VCRs. So guess what you can do when you have your own private screen?
This is really a podcast about the history of masturbation.
well, it's just okay. So basically, even in the 70s, Osamu Tezuka, the god of manga, even he's trying to make adult animation. Like he does the Cleopatra film that got marketed in America as like a porno movie, like Debbie Does Dallas, when it's really is more of an artistic film that has boobs in it.
Yeah, I think it was on YouTube in full at some point, just, illegally uploaded or one of those sites. And I was like scanning through it, and I felt like this is not salacious enough for how it was marketed.
But by the 80s, that's when pure pornography, getting rid of the art, starts taking over. Yeah, especially with adult games on the PC, which is why I feel like even up to today, it took forever in the video game market for big name companies like Sega or Capcom to get that they should put games on the PC, because I feel like there was a stigma, maybe still is, of like, well, no, PC games means porno, and we're a classy company that puts out things on consoles for families.
Yeah, I guess that's why. I mean, if you go back to the history of Japanese computer games, and by the way, check out Retronauts for more on that stuff. That's why you would see a lot of salacious or pornographic content in old Japanese PC games, even if it didn't belong. That's why, like, Kojima, the creator of Metal Gear, I mean, he is a pervert, number one, but games like Snatcher and Metal Gear would not have those perverted references or content if that wasn't an expected feature of Japanese computer games.
Exactly, yeah, and same with, like, if you look up Gainax's history, part of it that is not known to most Americans is they sold a lot of PC games that were not all entirely for the family or for young people. Anime, though, by the mid-'80s, was also looking to put out specially made VHS only, not for broadcast, adult cartoons, which we've talked about before is like, Americans get this wrong impression that when we get brought over the hentai, we think, oh, this broadcasts all the time in Japan. No, not the case. They don't do that. But
yeah, I mean, we talked about it, and that's why the idea of anime all being porn was so popular in America, and some older people still think that, like, oh, are you watching porno? And it's One Piece on TV.
Exactly. Yeah, it's for this generation of young animators who were in their 20s in the 80s, they were the first generation who really grew up as otaku, who they liked the occasional, shot of a boob that they'd see in, a Cutie Honey. And so they're like, well, why don't what if the whole anime was that? They
Let's make the whole airplane out of the boob.
Yeah. And so it's 1984. If we're going to have to be official in a footnote capacity, the first actual hentai anime was something called, literally, quote, Lolita Anime, which is gross crap from all I've read about it, and it's only worth noting as a footnote just so I don't get corrected when I say that a few months after that comes Cream Lemon, the first more popular adult anime that was done by another pushpin planning company, or A3P, a relatively new at the time animation studio.
I've been watching Game Center CX a lot with my wife because we're going to the live event in Japan for the 20th anniversary, and there are lots of jokes on the episodes about the host Arino knowing a lot about Cream Lemon.
Oh, well, we don't really understand this in America because it was never released here. Because let's just say they'd have to relocalize it to say all the characters are in college, or many of them are. But
I think actually there was we covered this on something, but that is actually a law that happened much later, in which the vagaries of it are like you can't produce I guess the disgusting term would be fake child pornography, or like simulated, but then that was viewed as unconstitutional, and that was not a thing. But for a short period of time, when you localize things with underage characters that were animated, you'd have to say like, I just got back from college, by the way, I'm 18.
Yes, yeah, but I mean, for taste purposes as well, I feel like it's
yeah. But no, they didn't want to be arrested for
Right.
selling what was viewed as legally child pornography, but it was actually just like a drawing of a woman.
But yeah, Cream Lemon was very, very popular. It was relatively cheap too. I mean, it wasn't though occasionally it had flashes of great animation, but they were semi-recurring anthologies, as in like, volume 1 continues volume 2, but then volume 3 starts a new story. And they were also like, this is how the money making it was: 22 minutes of original animation, and you were paying the pervert premium on those. Like, you were paying $100 in 1984 money to get your episode of Cream Lemon. And one of the top stories of it, and I know this because it's related to Project Aiko's release, is a story of a girl named Ami, and it's a weird incestuous story too. That I'm like, boy, this is kind of fucked up. I have to say, not to be too judgy, but I thought it was kind of fucked up.
And with my description earlier of like drawings of underage women, I think like that kind of idea is still appealing because people will watch things like Euphoria, which is like adults playing high schoolers fucking each other, and they're like, "Ooh, hit show."
Yeah.
So I mean, we're no different really into what we fantasize about and what we're into and what titillates us.
It's true. We, as Americans, we should not look down on anyone else's perversions, I should say there. Yeah, but okay, but that's Cream Lemon. It actually is a really big hit, at least in otaku circles. A3P will grow from this. Like, this is where it just begins. It was founded by, speaking of Tezuka, a former Mushi Pro employee, Kazufumi Nomura. And Nomura, based on his later work, I would say, I think he saw hentai as a starting place, not the end goal. And they become a pretty, a relatively upscale place by the end of the 80s. But you know what? Artists who are good at animating sex scenes also are good at drawing other stuff too, at least if they have the skills. And so that takes us to the only one that I actually watched scenes of, which is Pop Chaser, which is the 4th episode and 4th release. And it is a brand new story. It is not set in high school. It is set in a Mad Max Fist of the North Star kind of future, in a post-apocalyptic landscape where you have a cool bounty hunter named Rio, who rides around on her space motorcycle and is hunting down a group of like mech suit wearing, basically just the Mad Max Master Blaster guy. And you've got great mech fights. Then characters kind of just sit down in a bedroom and then they fuck. And then, though I will say the second sex scene in it is actually a very comedic sex scene that feels like Project Aiko, where basically one character's, it's also not all girl. It's a guy, a man and a woman are having sex, but the guy is also trying to pilot a mech at the same time while the act is happening, and it's a funny moment, Bob. You just gotta trust me on that. But also it's full of great explosions and tons of amazing animation, which you find out is because a lot of people worked on it who would go on to be some of the best animators of their generation, including Hideaki Anno animated on it. Like, there's some big explosions that are like, oh yeah, this rules.
Hey, there's something for everybody, it sounds like.
Apparently Anno was one of the only people who didn't use a pseudonym on it either. He's like, nah, write my real name on this. But
Hideaki Anno, pervert.
So it was him.
Put it in the credits.
Toshiyuki Inoue, who did some of the best animation we've seen in like Ghost in the Shell. Masayuki, who animated most of the Evangelion opening. Like, there's a moment in it where you actually is fine to look up, and it's no nudity in it. But it's on Sakugaboru. But for Pop Chaser, but it's Masayuki. It's a character is explaining why girls dressing up in the sailor suit is the hottest thing, hotter than a bunny girl outfit. And it's the guy gets so excited he does like a full spin around and like goes like rah. It's just like Eva Unit 1, like doing the full spin around and scream in the opening of Evangelion.
Hey, if you can listen to this podcast, you're at least 18 because you have a credit card, so you can watch all this filth if you want to. We won't judge you.
Yeah. We won't tell. We won't tell. But a lot of the people who worked on it were also working on Urusei Yatsura, and this was like their dirty night job while they were working on the hit TV anime in '84, and also on the many, many movies, working themselves to death, quite honestly. And yeah, it's not to say the teens as the leads in anime and manga wasn't a big deal up before the 80s, but the 80s really did popularize like a certain type of teen girl star with Lum in Urusei Yatsura, and also Nausicaa was a big piece of that. And before Nausicaa, Clarice in Castle Cagliostro, I believe that's character, the lead girl in Castle Cagliostro. And so a lot of these guys were trained under Mamoru Oshii. And they specifically say in interviews like, oh, yeah, we learned from Oshii on Urusei Yatsura, and we wanted to take it to the next step. And they try that out on Pop Chaser, including the lead director on Pop Chaser was Katsuhiko Nishijima, as well as Yuji Moriyama. Both of them would go on to be the director and animation director and character designer for Project A-ko, and they were the leads on Pop Chaser. And also working on Pop Chaser was major talent Atsuko Nakajima. She would go on to be a key animator on not just Project A-ko, but she defined the looks of Maison Ikkoku, Ranma 1/2, and Rurouni Kenshin. Nakajima's a big deal.
I immediately recognized her name because I don't have a lot of original anime art, but at my first anime convention, I have an original illustration from her.
That's amazing.
From 2001.
That's amazing.
Yes, and it's not from Ranma 1/2. It's from Haunted Junction. Everyone else was getting Ranma 1/2 illustrations. I got something from an anime that had just come out in the States, and she forgot how to draw the character, so I had to show her the box.
That's funny, man.
And I also wanted to point something else out, Henry. If you want to know more about like why Japanese schoolgirls became iconic, Matt Alt has a great book called Pure Invention, and it's a bunch of little stories about how things caught on in Japan, became worldwide sensations, and there's a chapter in there, I believe, that's about how schoolgirls became trendsetters, and they basically started the fads that would catch on worldwide, like Tamagotchis and, you know, carrying around cell phones and all that fun stuff.
That's a great point. That is why, like, the schoolgirl, I mean, there's, you know, horny reasons the schoolgirl is popular as well, but yeah, there's also just cultural reasons, like, that it spread so much. And yeah, Moriya, especially, who was one of the top guys on Urusei Yatsura, literally said this was the culmination of his experiences working on Lum cartoons under Oshii. So no wonder I really love this, because it does feel like, oh yeah, this is Lum's adventures taken to the next level, even, or at least the next level of like horniness in ways that Rumiko Takahashi maybe wouldn't have approved of. But so Cream Lemon is a big hit in 1985. It's doing so well. Every new volume is coming out like every 3 months or so, selling a lot. So of course, as the bubble is growing and growing in Japan, they get interest, A3P does, to do another bigger version of Pop Chaser. So the Pop Chaser team, instead of moving on to another episode, they are there instead like, hey, this could be longer. This could be a longer OVA that we sell at a premium. And then their distributor even says this could actually be theatrically released first before we sell it on VHS and Laserdisc, the like relatively new Laserdisc at the time. So they release it in theaters. They can like sell a shitload of tickets first and then sell it to those same people again on home media.
Perfect. They're
And,
still doing that scam today.
Yep. I mean, we're finally getting that in America now of just like, hey, we know you're going to buy this One Piece movie, or this Dragon Ball movie. But before you do that, don't you want to see it in theaters from Fathom Events first?
Well, especially during the pandemic when Japan not to blame the entire country, but the anime studio behind Demon Slayer was like, what if we just put half the season in theaters and then we showed it on TV later and then we sold it to you? It was the ultimate scam, and that is still the number one highest grossing movie in Japan. Nothing will beat it due to the circumstances under which it was released.
Hayao Miyazaki could only hope to. It'll never happen. No, so they're planning for theatrical release, but they don't want to just show it in porno theaters. So if you're going to put it in actual movie theaters that the general public is going to see, you can't have actual like real sex scenes in it like they did in Pop Chaser. So even though at first as they plan it out as a love story between three girls, they then decide, well, let's get rid of the actual like times they have sex, and that'll make more room for big action and comedy anyway. That's why all of the subtext is there, that these are girls who love each other or who want to have sex with each other. That's because the scenes where they would have had sex aren't in the movie.
That's for you to draw on your own.
See, they've left it to the fanfic creators from now on since then. Also, Nishijima was the director. He joked in one of the behind-the-scenes videos that the reasons he did it was to get his teeth fixed because he has kind of fucked up teeth, front teeth in the video. And he's like, oh, I'm doing this to get my teeth fixed. And I think he did. I think he did make enough money. And Moriyama would go on to be the animation director and lead character designer on it. And another thing to note in this crazy thing compared to now, pretty much everybody put in charge while they did have proof of concept that they did a great job on Pop Chaser and that they worked on Urusei Yatsura TV and films and other stuff. Still, these were guys in their mid-20s being handed like a movie budget and being trusted like that they even said in like interviews in the 90s, the directors were saying that would never happen now in the 90s, and it really wouldn't happen now in 2023.
Well, they had that horny animator coffee and cigarette energy that you just lose after you turn 30. I would trust them more than veterans, actually.
If you watch the making of Secret File thing they made at the time where they're interviewing everybody at their desks, you just have to think like, oh, they must have thrown away so many cans of coffee and emptied every ashtray before they started filming. But the guys, they're having fun. There's some fun, if shy, animators talking. But yeah, I mean, that youthful spirit keeps them up all night, and also. They even say that one of the animators says, this is Nishijima's reaction to his pent-up frustration with the serious anime that was taking over TV at the time. Like Gundam Double Zeta, for instance. He was just like, this is not really, I want something fun. Let's have some fun again.
And I'm sure everything was just trying to ape the Gundam vibes, basically, too.
Also, this didn't come up in any of my research, but this feels like it owes a lot to Daikon 4 and the Daikon 3 movies. Like how it's just a pile of parodies, and it's also a super powered redhead at the center of it having big action scenes.
Yes, and I assume that the animators had seen those, and those were the films produced for the Daikon Festival, and I guess the early people that would go on to form Gainax, or maybe had formed Gainax by that point, were behind them. Is that correct?
Yeah, by 86 when they were working on this, Wings of Aonomi's or Royal Space Force was being worked on at this point. They'd already sold that project, but it hadn't been released yet to failure. But
Wings of Mayonnaise.
Yeah, Wings. but yeah, if you look at the credits on this, several early Gainax founders who worked on Daikon animated on this. Like they are all friends. If you were on that level of animator, if you weren't working at Gainax, you freelanced at it and were one of the top in-demand folks. But so yeah, they also, I mean, there was the promise of, hey, you want to draw something really crazy with a big budget? Come on this thing that we're working as fast as possible on. Like, they're working so fast when the money came in, they're like, hey, this has to be summer of 86. And they're like, okay, well, we don't really even have a full scenario written. Let's just go straight to storyboards and just build and build. That's, I think, also why 10 minutes of this movie is just a long parody of Macross that has nothing to do with A-ko and B-ko and C-ko. But yeah, and again, the kind of money it got, it's not a sequel, it's not an adaptation, it's not a continuation of a TV show. It had the kind of budget that can only be funded in the big bubble era, though of course nobody was doing cocaine there. It was so illegal in Japan. It was only done in America, not there.
Yes.
Yeah.
We had the monopoly on that. I mean, go watch Scarface.
Isn't it funny to watch in the Yakuza games, like, in the or Like a Dragon games, that somebody is like the biggest.
Hey, we're calling them Yakuza. That's what they called them when they introduced them here, and I'm gonna keep calling them that.
But when the guy is the most evil guy when he does drugs on screen, like that's like,
or has a gun, the one gun in the entire game.
Yeah, that's like, oh, this guy is gonna be one of the few that gets killed instead of redeemed at some point as your great rival. But yeah, they're working on it so fast too that they kind of decide, let's just go with it and not come up with names for the characters. Like, they had been writing them down as, A-ko, B-ko, C-ko, which does directly translate to girl A, girl B, girl C.
Yeah, and I thought like ko is just it's a common ending on Japanese women's names.
Yeah, and though if we're speaking technically, the characters' names in it are A-ko, B-ko, and She-ko, and it would be written out like in English, romanized as E-I-K-O, B-I-I-K-O, S-H-I-I-K-O. But no, it's to me it'll always be A-ko. But also that's because that was the title they even called it in Japan. Like, it is the poster in Japan is Project A-ko, and it was intentionally named as a parody of Jackie Chan's big film in Japan in 1983 was Project A. So they jokingly internally called it Project A-ko, and then they'd like, let's just call it that in the theaters.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
I was saving this GarageBand file, and it saved me a lot of time because the default name is just Project, and I just typed in A-ko, and I was done.
I did the same. And also their names also equate to, or it's a reference to blood type personalities. A-ko is a real O blood type personality. B-ko is a real A blood type personality, and C-ko is a B type personality. Which I say, at least change the names for A and B then, if you're gonna have it like.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't really get
It's
that.
a bit too confusing. Yeah, but part of liking Japanese media is knowing the birthday and the blood type of all your favorite characters.
And as Moriyama would say in 2001, he also was very thankful that when they were working on it, copyright enforcement in Japan was a lot weaker than it would be later, because their parodies are barely parodies. They draw the characters and then give them slightly different hair color. Or they even, as I'll get to with the voice actors, just cast people in roles that are like, well, this is just like the role you do, except now you're the joke version of it.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a video game fan, not necessarily an anime fan, you know this for sure, because there's so many Japanese games that just said, what if we did this but with a few of the names change? And we already mentioned Metal Gear. Like, yeah, that's like every 80s movie the creator loved, barely disguised. And we mentioned Snatcher before. It's Blade Runner plus Terminator equals Snatcher. So I honestly miss those days. I wish we could have more fun.
Yeah, I swear 10 years ago when I was a games journalist, I would ask about the opposite version of that, where like they would change things more than I thought they'd have to, of like, well, wait, I know that's like a Batman parody, but you don't have to like make it so distant. They're like, no, the lawyers on the Japan side are so worried about parody, like they don't understand it, I was told. But yeah, it was the Wild West in '86 when they did this. A couple other big names who worked on this early in their careers: Kiya Asamiya, who was the Nadesco creator.
Yes.
And also Masaki Kajishima, who was the creator of Tenchi Muyo. So
Wow, yeah, Nadesco. I do recall that from my early anime reviewing days. ADV was really poising it to be the next Evangelion. Maybe it sold well, but it just went nowhere from there.
I would say based on that ADV no longer exists, I would say it probably was not the Ava seller they wanted it to be. Yeah, they were hitting it hard, but it definitely has parity with this with Aiko. You can see Aiko qualities in Nadesco as well. But meanwhile, the voice cast on the Japanese side was a lot of people who would go on to big things. You've got Miki Ito, who would go on to be Android 18 in Dragon Ball Z, along with a lot of other stuff. Biko is Emi Shinohara, who would go on to be Sailor Jupiter. Siko is Michi Tomizawa, who would be Sailor Mars. And a few heavyweights of voice acting in here, including the leader of the aliens, Napoli Polita, is voiced by Shuichi Ikeda, who is Char Aznable and Shanks, red-haired Shanks in One Piece.
Oh, wow, yeah. I forgot they were the same guy.
And Mari, who is drawn to be a parody of Kenshiro from Fist of the North Star, is voiced by Daisuke Gori, who is Mr. Satan and Hayashi Mishima in the Tekken games. So he knows how to make grunts.
So they got some all-stars for this.
Yes, yeah. Oh, and they got Megumi Hayashibara in one of her first roles, a very small role. And a quick mention about the excellent soundtrack, too, and this was one of the best bonus features on the Discotheque Blu-ray. They talked to the soundtrack creators who are Americans. You might think watching it now with today's eyes, you're like, oh, this was what Central Park Media paid for to Americanize it more. No, it was a fully English American-made pop soundtrack for the soundtrack to Aiko on its original release. So at the time, 80s pop, American 80s pop, was huge in Japan. Like that, it's why I love and will put on city pop music in the background all the time, because I love that 80s music from America, and then they loved it in Japan and emulated it with their own pop stars there too.
It's really just a bunch of Madonna songs you've never heard.
It's the best. It's the best. And that's this soundtrack too. So the story goes from the producers on it, Joey Carbone and Richie Zito. Carbone and Zito were Brooklynites, grew up in the 70s, loving rock. They became top-level self-taught session musicians and producers. They moved to the Los Angeles in the 70s. In the 80s, they work on Flashdance and Beverly Hills Cop. So much of the music that when you hear it, you're like, well, that's 80s. That sounds like 80s to me. They either produced it or recorded the tracks for them. And they were starting to get big in Japan. They had a connection to Warner Japan, who were like, they're like, oh, we want any producer who works on American music that sounds like that. Make stuff that sounds like that for us with Japanese stars. So they write a song fully in English for a film called Saotomi Hankenden that was a big, big pop hit there. And so they're getting to be known in Japan as well. Project Aiko, then, it's decided by Nomura, the owner of A3P, working with Sony's distributor of music. He's like, can you hook me up with some American producers that can write songs for this? And so they basically, in a month, have to write 3 vocal tracks and 16 background music tracks to a film that is not complete and they can't see. It's pretty crazy to hear how Zito and Carbone did it. And they're also told, when you get together the women to sing this, get them to be young blonde girls, because maybe we sell them as a pop group in Japan. So they finds 3 young women, mainly that they knew through Star Search, because Zito worked on Star Search. But one of them went on to be really famous, or not really famous, but Samantha Newark, she would go on to be the voice of Jem in the same year. She's one of the singers on it. But
oh, cool.
But yeah, they do the whole soundtrack within a month. And this is also another connection to Urusei Yatsura. A huge part of why it was successful was the soundtracks of it. It made soundtracks indispensable. Like, if you make a hit anime, you better have songs in it to sell soundtracks for like $50 copies in Japan. And it was sold through the Polystar label. Just watch the whole documentary to see. They talked for like 40 minutes to all the singers and the producers. And Carbone would go on to be one of he would move to Japan and be one of the top J-pop producers in Japan. And he would joke of like, oh, I didn't speak Japanese then, I do now because I needed to for my job. But it's like these guys who could not be, rock stars in America, they become mega stars, or at least big name producers in Japan.
I didn't know about this American or this international connection. That's great.
Yeah, the give a listen to the soundtrack. It is like classic Pat Benatar songs, basically stuck into the background. And so yeah, just enjoy that soundtrack. But so they finish the movie barely in time. They stick in tons of in jokes that I'll mention when we go through it scene by scene. But basically, it was released in theaters. They announced it with a fancy press event in March of 1986. It's heavily promoted in all of the otaku magazines like Anime Ju and a lot of the lesser known ones. And they're all sold of like, hey, you dorko who know the names of all the animators on Urusei Yatsura, there's a brand new thing. Go see it. Like, it's getting the full court press from the otaku magazines. And it's released in theaters along with a 30-minute no sex finale of a Cream Lemon story. So this really is Cream Lemon the movie, no porno edition.
Well, I guess you're getting an extra movie on top of that, right?
Yes, yeah. You basically get this movie that's like 90 minutes long and then a 40-minute long finale movie to the story of Ami. Will she become a great musician or will she want to have sex with her brother? Which will she do? Like that's
We've all reached that crossroads in our life. Incest or a musical superstardom.
But so Project A-ko does pretty well in theaters, and soon it's released on VHS at the end of 1986. The listed price on the VHS tape, or at least the one that's archived on the Discotheque Blu-ray, 12,800 yen, which is basically $120.
That's before inflation, though, right?
That's the listed price on the 1986 VHS.
I assume it's probably, I don't know, $320 today, USD,
yeah,
something like
be.
that. Yeah. Yeah, I guess, I mean, Japanese media was always so expensive. I think only in recent years has it gone down because now everything is much more globalized and they have more access to our cheap media. But they are also much more friendly about renting things, except for video games. So you could actually rent CDs in Japan and things like that. So the rental market was much more prevalent there, and buying the item was for the super fans, which is why they would be so high priced and come with all these extras and everything like that.
That's why you were getting the premium thing. I didn't even see what the price was on the Laserdisc. Like, it did come out on Laserdisc in '86 as well, and I gotta think that Laserdisc was like $200 or something. Like, it's but that was where several of the extras were originally, and for A3P after its release, it was doing very well, but they decided, you know what? We're not going to do theatrical for the next one. Let's just do another OVA follow-up. And also, Cream Lemon still continued for a few years after this. Like, it was still a profitable enterprise. I believe it went for 36 volumes at least. And then even got a new Cream Lemon in like 89 or something that was like a reboot series. So, yeah.
I forget if we talked about this, but did it come over to America, Cream Lemon?
It's... 3 episodes were released by a group called the Boner Brothers in America.
Oh no, Boner Brothers.
Which on the cover of it are 2 gremlins jacking off to let you know how classy it was. But,
was this like a horror label or something? Offshoot? What's going on here? Gremlins.
I think it was just a like, hey, we're the extra scuzzy porno label, and we happen to get the rights to 3 episodes of this anime and put it out here.
I don't know if you remember Media Blasters, that company. They also had an offshoot just for, salacious material, but those trailers would be on the DVDs that you would buy normally, the non-porn.
That was always shocking to see on a Media Blaster. Yeah, Central Park Media had their own shingle of porno, but you didn't see the ads for those on your US Manga Core episodes. Yeah, it was always shocking to see those, but Cream Lemon never came out in America officially other than that. I think because it was, I also think his A3P, despite it putting them afloat, I don't think they were into licensing it either. Not to say that, I would think in the 90s, there would have been interest from American distributors. Somebody would have paid A3P for Cream Lemon, the anime from the creators of Project A-ko. Like, that sells itself. Like, you'd want to distribute that. So I have to think that's a lack of will on the A3P side. But as A3P was growing after this, and when they left behind Cream Lemon, they started working on like their next theatrical release. I could see why they didn't want to do Eiko 2 as a theatrical release, because they were working on the very classy Katsuhiro Otomo Robot Carnival. That was their next movie.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. One of the many anthology movies of the era.
And then they did Rojin Z after that in 91. And they get JoJo's Bizarre Adventure after that. So A3P did not stay as a porno company. Though, of course, by about 07, 08, as the recessions came in, that's when A3P became a bit of a shadow of its former self. It stopped doing original productions and really just started doing subcontracting work. They lost a lot of their top talent, and they just kind of floated along on their old licenses until apparently in 2021 the company was dissolved after the passing of the founder Nomura. So R.I.P. to A3P and Nomura there. But of course Nishijima and Moriyama would continue on many things afterwards that definitely feel like Eiko successors. Like when I saw a list of them, I was like, oh, All-Purpose Cat Girl Nuku Nuku and Jungle Day Ukiyo.
We were watching, my wife and I were watching the anime channel on Pluto TV very late at night. Maybe we had a few beers, and we watched about half of a Nuku Nuku episode, and man, it is the cheapest looking crap from the late 90s ever. But it is Megumi Hiyashibara as the main character.
They spent all their money on her. That's what I must
I think that's true, based on how it looks.